let's start with the basics, though. Keldon, what is a monopoly? What is an oligopoly? Let's talk about the basics before we can get to that more high-level stuff.
Absolutely, and thanks for having us on. So a literal monopoly means a single firm or individual who has control over a given market. And an oligopoly is when a market is controlled by only a handful, maybe 3 or 4 firms. But we use the term monopoly more generally to talk about when corporations have too much control over a market and can protect themselves from the competition that delivers benefits to Canadians.
And I think one of the concerns around monopolies is that they can leave consumers worse off. Robin, can you give an explanation of how that happens and maybe some examples?
Sure. So when you have a market that's dominated by one firm or maybe a small number of firms, consumers have less choice. And with that lack of choice, these firms have power. They have the ability to charge higher prices for the same quality of good, or perhaps charge the same price, but decrease the quality of their product. It's like a different type of form of, you know, taking value from consumers. And so it's really that lack of choice and that lack of freedom from the consumer's perspective that makes monopoly so terrible.
And Andrew, could you give some examples of monopolies in Canada that our viewers might be familiar with, and maybe some examples of how they have hurt consumers?
Sure. I think some of the most obvious ones are the telecom, with where we have 4, maybe soon to be 3 large players across the country. Banks are typically viewed as one. The grocery stores, like I think back to the start of the COVID pandemic when there was the Hero Pay brought in for like 3 months and then it was just canceled and gone. So banks, telecom, and grocery stores are three big ones.
And
That,
all
like
ones that we need, right? Like it's not like you can
Exactly.
choose not to bank or not to buy food.
Yeah.
Keldon, what about how monopolies can stifle innovation? What can you tell us about that? And if you have any examples that our viewers might be familiar with?
Yeah, so I think the main way that monopoly stifles innovation is by removing the competitive pressure that actually pushes companies to invest and develop new and better products for consumers. So it's tough to give concrete examples because we're talking about when something doesn't happen, but there's quite a bit of evidence showing that when firms are exposed to more competition, they tend to invest more and generate more products and signs of innovation we look to, such as patents and copyrights.
Like most economically developed countries, Canada has laws designed to deal with monopoly power. In Canada, that law is the Competition Act. So, Robin, if we have these laws, why are there still all of these monopolies in our country?
Yeah, there's 2 ways you can think of it. There's 2 sort of avenues. The first is the law itself. Our law has some pretty major deficiencies that actually enable monopolies to take place in our country. In fact, under our law, it is legal to have a merger to a monopoly, and this is pretty unheard of if you compare us to other similar countries or jurisdictions. The other aspect of it is the enforcement of the act. The Competition Bureau, with its limited budget, needs to make decisions about what sort of
Right.
conduct, what sort of mergers it's going to tackle. And if it doesn't have the resources to do that, then it's not going to enforce the law to the full extent. So
Right.
there's these 2 sort of avenues to it.
We've got to go to commercial break, but when we come back, I want to talk about your new initiative.